So in the last video, we talked about the importance of context, seeing the prayers in context. Now, we saw earlier how the prayers are nice and short. We like short. We enjoy having short prayers. Can really concentrate on something that's short. These prayers are also very beautiful. They're very poetic, and they're just full of meaning. So that's where the problem comes in, is how do we know that we're getting the full meaning out of the prayers? How do we know that we're getting everything that we need to know out of these prayers itself? Because some of these are ancient prayers. These are pretty old. Sometimes they talk in a language that we're not very familiar with. So the importance of how is we're going to get into the depth of the riches. We want to go dig deep for the gold and really get the fullness of the meaning. So when we're talking to God, we're using the God's words, but we're also listening to these words as God's instructions so we can live by them. They can be very life-changing if you know how to use them and know the meaning and the interpretation of these prayers. So how do you go about that? Context, that's how you do it. Now, normally what we do is we take prayers out of their context. We just take the prayer and we just out of it, we rip it right out of where it's supposed to be, and that's where you miss a lot of the context that's going on. Let me give you an example of context. Let's say you have a phrase. The New England Patriots had a perfect regular season. Now that's a pithy little saying that's kind of out of context. You don't know if it's positive or if it's negative. Now, if you give it a little bit of context, if you say that there was that those words came from the lips of an enthusiastic Patriots fan, you would say that that's probably a very positive statement. However, if that same statement, that the Patriots have a perfect regular season, came from a fan from the New York Giants, it would be a total insult. And the reason why is because why would you have a perfect season and not win the Super Bowl? It wouldn't. It would be a complete insult. And of course, especially if the Patriots lose to the New York Giants. So you see that we have here is you have a saying that can be completely positive or completely negative according to the context. It depends on who's saying it and how it's being said. So context really gives us the meaning of these prayers. So that's the importance of seeing these prayers. If you take the Our Father out of its Matthew's Sermon on the Mount, it won't have the same meaning. So you want the deepest amount of meaning, so you want to be able to read these things in its context. So that's the idea behind understanding. That's what this series is about. So you're saying to yourself, well, okay, now I got to read these prayers in context. I mean, I got to read the whole Bible. I got to read Leviticus. I haven't read that in years. I have to go through. Well, that's another reason why you want to look at this series that I want to present to you, the context to these prayers, to make it easy for you so you can understand what these prayers mean and how they are used and formed. So it's going to be an exciting series because you're going to the Bible, which can be a little bit complicated. There's lots of battles. There's lots of big names. There's lots of different genres. There's poetry. There's parables. There's a little history in there. It gets all mingled up, and you can get really confused very easily. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it really easy to understand, to show the context. Now, the last thing I want to say is that did you know that when you read it in context to where it's coming from, did you know that almost every prayer in the Old Testament and the New Testament is based on a promise of God? It's based on a promise of God. Somehow in that prayer, you're going back and you say, remember God, you promised. Why is that important in prayer? Why the biblical prayers and these short little prayers go back to say, God, you promised? Because it gives us leverage. That we know that the prayer is going to be answered. When you pray, you want to make sure that you're going to pray for something that God's going to actually return. And so these prayers are always going to be answered because God had promised. So prayers are based on a promise. So that's why we need to really see these prayers in the context of the Bible itself. Now, in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the Pentateuch. We're going to see the prayers in the Pentateuch. Now, there's not a lot of prayers in the Pentateuch, so why are we going to spend so much time on there? Well, because we have the Psalms, and the Psalms are really based on the Pentateuch. So we have to understand the promises that God made during the books of the Pentateuch, so we can understand the depth of these prayers, and so how we can have leverage with God. Now, God gave us these promises so that we could use the leverage, that we could use them to depend on God, that God would answer to us. He doesn't have to promise. He doesn't have to make oaths. God doesn't have to do that, but he does so that we can pray, so that we can have something to turn to God and say, God, look at you said we can have pizza on Friday. That's what kids do to their parents when their parents have promised them. So that's what you want to do, is look at these. So it's really important to see the promises in the Old Testament. So we're going to go through now the different sections of the Bible, take a look and see how these, what the context is for these prayers.